This is the new Tata Punch that Tata calls a subcompact SUV. Now, before you get too ahead of yourselves, this is a front-wheel drive model, but as Tata puts it, it's got the agility of a hatchback with the DNA of an SUV. Classify it as you will, but be in no doubt because this is one very interesting product. A few basic details first. The Punch is built on Tata's new age Alpha architecture that also forms the base for the Altroz hatchback. And within the Tata family, the Punch sits between the Tiago NRG Cross hatchback and the Nexon compact SUV. The Punch is midway between the two models in its 3.8 meter length, 1.7 meter width and 24-45mm wheelbase, but it's actually a few millimeters taller than a Nexon. In terms of rivals, you could club the Punch with the Maruti Suzuki Ignis and Mahindra KUV 100, but as you'll learn over the video, the Tata is a very different proposition. It starts with the way it looks. The Punch is a chunky little car with plenty of road presence. It's got the high-set bonnet, the upright pillars, the accentuated wheel arches and the cladding you'd associate with an SUV. Notably, there's a handy 187mm of ground clearance too. The Punch is the smallest of Tata's SUV tribe and there's a clear link to the larger Harrier and Safari up front with the split headlamp setup. That's LED DRLs on top and the main headlights positioned lower down. Top versions like this creative one get projector lights, and a cool detail is the functional vent alongside the main lights. The LED DRLs on top and the grille are underlined by chrome. Interestingly, the grille is closed off with a tri-arrow shaped opening for the horn behind. The actual air inlet is lower down on the bumper that itself comes embellished with more tri-arrow details. The Punch looks purposeful in profile and the generous cladding on the doors does help to this end. Larger wheels and fatter rubber would have helped fill out the arches better, but the 16-inch machined alloys on the top spec version are attractive. The Punch's glasshouse is accentuated by the blacked out A and C pillars and there's a contrast roof and mirrors for added effect. Like the Altroz, the Punch's rear door handles are positioned behind the windows rather than at the doors, which is something you get used to. Also, as on the Altroz, the Punch's doors open to 90 degrees, easing access to the cabin. At the rear, styling is attractive. You like how the black of the C-pillar flows into the rear windscreen, the tailgate has its prominent cuts, and the tail lights with their tri-arrow LEDs also stand out. There's cladding on the rear bumper too, but maybe they could have gone easy on the tri-arrow details, and that cutout at the base makes the bumper seem incomplete. On the whole, the Punch is really eye-catching and drew attention everywhere we went. What do you think of the Tata Punch? Let us know in the comments section below. And if you haven't already, please do like the video and subscribe to the Autocar India channel and join us on the journey to 2 million subscribers. On to the interior. With doors that swing open to 90 degrees and relatively high set seats, getting into a Tata Punch is very easy and convenient. And once you're settled in, you like what you see. The dashboard sports a layered look, and what's really nice is the different plastics that have been used inside the cabin. There's textured plastics on the dash top, around the center console. There's Tata's tri-arrow pattern, which you'll find if you look closely at this panel. There's textured plastics lower down, and in general, the level of quality is quite nice. Sure, there are some places where panel gaps are not quite as tight as they could have been, but then again, for a car of this price, it's more than acceptable. Build quality is also commendable. The Punch's chunky AC vents look nice, the center console is neat, but you won't need to look all too hard to find the common elements shared with other Tata models, such as the 7-inch touchscreen, the steering wheel, and even the part digital instruments that come from the Tata Altroz. To go into a bit more detail of these elements, the touchscreen isn't super slick, but it works well enough for a car of this class. It packs in Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and there are even games to keep you occupied in traffic jams. Sound quality is decent from the 4-speaker and 2-tweeter setup, and the rear view camera with guidelines also comes handy. Top spec versions also get the option of Tata's IRA connected features, allowing you to keep an eye on your car remotely. The leather-wrapped flat-bottom steering wheel is nice to hold, and it's impressive that part digital instruments are included too. The 7-inch screen is informative and includes turn-by-turn navigation, and also gives the position of the front tires just in case you want to be sure which way they're pointing when starting out. However, the squared-out dials look a bit unusual, and because the needle for the digital tachometer is triangulated, it shows an RPM range rather than a specific reading. Also, we wish the Punch shared the premium knitted roof lining with other Tata cars. It's not a biggie, but it's a quality element that we've just come to expect in the latest of Tatas. In terms of practicality, the Punch scores well with a large and cool glove box that also has an Easter egg in the rhino motif, something you'd find on the rear windscreen too. All 4 doors get usable door pockets with bottle holders, and there's a spacious recess at the base of the dashboard as well. Of the other things, drivers will like the view out, and even the seating position is very relaxed and lets you really spread out and sit, and that's thanks to a very accommodating footwell. Now the seats themselves are quite large, but someone of my size will find that under thigh support is a bit lacking, and you'll also miss a center armrest. Talking features, in addition to all that I've touched upon, the top spec Punch Creative gets keyless entry, push button start, auto climate control, auto headlamps and wipers, and cruise control. What's nice is buyers have the option to upgrade each of the 4 trim levels with certain features of a higher variant. However, there's no sunroof for the moment at least, and rear aircon vents have been left out too. Switching focus to the back. The Tata Punch is reasonably roomy for rear seat passengers. I'm just under 6 feet tall, the front seat is set to my driving position, and I have a few inches of knee room and a lot of space to tuck my feet under the front seat. Now this cabin isn't really wide to seat 3 abreast in great comfort, but when the need arises, you do have a flat floor which does aid comfort for the middle seat passenger. However, this is still a place best suited to 2 passengers. Fold the armrest down, use the adjustable headrest, and you can sit in relatively good comfort. That being said, there are a few negatives. The backrest is a touch upright, and taller passengers will find their hair brushing against the roof lining. Rear seat passengers will also have to reach out to use the cup holders between the front seats. It's important to bring in that the Nexon is significantly roomier in both legroom and shoulder room, so if you'll be traveling 5 up often, it's the larger Tata that'll fit your needs better. In terms of space for luggage, the little Punch is actually quite accommodating. The loading lip is a touch high, but with 319 litres or 366 litres if measured to the roof, there's enough room for suitcases and some soft bags. You can also fold the single-piece rear seat back to create more space. A spare tyre is standard, and you also get a puncture repair kit. Here's a brief on the engine and gearboxes the Punch can be had with. The Punch is solely available with Tata's 1.2-litre 3-cylinder Revotron petrol engine. It's the same engine that powers the Tiago and Tigor, but with enhancements to the air intake that Tata says helps deliver better low-speed performance. The engine makes 86 horsepower and 113 Newton meters of torque. What's not known for now are the fuel economy numbers. Gearbox options include a 5-speed manual and a 5-speed AMT. A diesel is unlikely to join the lineup, but Tata hasn't ruled out a turbo petrol engine for the Punch and says it'll study customer feedback before taking a call. An all-electric version is also understood to be in development. Here's what the Punch manual is like to drive. The engine feels nice enough at city speeds. You won't have any trouble keeping up with the flow of traffic, but the build of power is quite flat, and performance is best described as adequate but not really exciting. The engine simply isn't as peppy as a Maruti K12 unit, for instance, though low-speed performance is decent and drivability and even smoothness are better than what you get in a Tiago. Our preliminary tests revealed the Punch to take 17.26 seconds from 20 to 80 kph in third gear, and even the 16.44 seconds 0 to 100 kph time is no great shakes. This isn't a car that you'll like to hustle. The Punch gets up to cruising speed smartly enough, and it'll maintain a steady cruise without any trouble. But when you want to, say, overtake a large trailer in a hurry, you will have to shift down to a lower gear and get the most out of the engine. A punchy turbo petrol engine or even a diesel engine would have really transformed the Punch. You do get two driving modes that alter the engine's characteristics. There isn't a world of a difference between the two driving modes. City should be your default mode, but when you do want to eke out the maximum fuel economy, which is the need of the hour today, you can switch to Eco Drive mode. In Eco, you'll find that power delivery becomes a bit more leisurely, but performance is actually usable for everyday city life. And if you want even more economy from your Tata Punch, there's also the option of activating Auto Start Stop. The feature switches the engine off at long hauls once the gear is moved to neutral and turns it back on as you depress the clutch. Trouble is, it also switches off the air conditioning, leaving only the blower on, which is not ideal on a hot day. Engine refinement is good but not great. The Tata Punch's engine sounds a bit grainy. You can hear that 3-cylinder thrum in the background, and when you do extend it, say above 4000 RPM or so, you'll also hear a whine from the engine bay. As for the clutch and gearbox, the Punch's clutch is light, but the gearbox is not the slickest in the business. Gear shifts will require a bit of effort from you. Again, it's not to the point of being a deal breaker, but if you don't want the job of changing gears altogether, the Punch AMT is worth a look. It's still not as smooth as a traditional torque converter automatic, but there has been progress in the world of AMTs. Shift shock that is associated with AMTs is pretty well contained, but that pause between shifts is still something that you will experience on the Punch AMT. There is a pause between first and second gear and second and third gear, and actually the system works its smoothest with gentle throttle inputs. The gearbox also responds differently to throttle inputs. Drive with a gentle and mild foot and it works smooth. Drive with a bit more vigor and the gearbox tends to feel a bit jerky. The pauses get heightened. But when you do mash your foot down on the throttle, the gearbox surprisingly is quite quick to downshift and grant you access to power when you need it. Again, this is not a zippy car, and kickdown acceleration is humdrum even by 3-cylinder naturally aspirated car standards. The shift logic is better than the first of Tata's AMTs, but the system is still not free of its quirks. The gearbox does tend to fumble on very long inclines and it'll go up and down the gears before it really finds its rhythm. But it's a problem that you can get around by shifting to manual mode and taking control of shifts yourself. What's nice is that the gearbox is responsive to manual shifts and grants you a quick downshift when you really need it, making overtakings that little bit easier. In town, you'll find creep mode to work well enough, but on uphill starts, there is some rollback before you get forward motion. Back into the manual, and there's a lot more to touch upon, such as the feeling of confidence behind the wheel. The elevated seating position and upright pillars do give you the impression of driving an SUV, and that subconsciously adds to confidence on Indian roads. Helping that impression are the Punch's high-speed manners. You like the feeling of confidence that you get in the Punch on the highway. High-speed stability is good and it feels as sure-footed as a larger and heavier car would. For the record, the Tata Punch weighs 1035 kgs. Also nice are the brakes. You get a reasonably good feel at the pedal, and braking power is good, and it also stays quite stable under hard braking. On the subject, the Punch gets ABS with EBD, corner brake control, and what Tata calls brake sway control to ensure the car doesn't veer about under hard braking. The safety suite also includes dual airbags and ISOFIX child seat mounts. The Tata Punch has been crash tested by Global NCAP, but the rating was not out at the time of shooting this video. The Tata Altroz that's built on the same platform was rated a full 5 stars on adult occupant protection, so you can expect the Punch to put up a strong show as well. There are some other highlights too. As has almost become a Tata trademark, the Punch's steering is nice and smooth and something that you'll really enjoy on long drives out of town. Even in the city, you'll like the steering that's light and easy to twirl and just generally makes the Punch a very nimble and friendly car to live with. But what the Punch distinguishes itself for is the suspension, some bit of low-speed stiffness notwithstanding. Like the latest of Tatas, the Punch has a robust suspension, and what that means is that you don't have to really shy away from bad or even non-existent roads. It softens the blow of potholes, and there's also confidence in knowing that there's ample ground clearance at your disposal. Just going by the section of road that we did, there is some truth to this being an SUV and not your typical hatchback. Tata even set up a mild off-road course to drive home the point, over to Renuka.
Okay, so in the Tata Punch and about to do a little bit of an off-road course, not something you'd quite expect to do in a car like this, and I have to say it is pretty daunting. There are quite some steep gradients and wheel articulation. Let's see how it does. First off, I have to say that I have got really nice visibility because there's a lot of seat height adjustment, so I can see really clearly out front, and that's something you want when you're going off-road and going to places where you really can't see stuff up ahead. I'm going to go down a very steep incline and feel like the front will bottom out, but it doesn't quite. Steep incline now that I have to go up. And a very sharp turn right, so yeah, this turns on a coin. Very agile. I'm pretty impressed with it so far. A bunch of steep ruts to show us wheel articulation. This is not something I would imagine that I could put a small car like this through, but honestly, this 187 millimeters of ground clearance, and now through the water, 370 millimeters of water wading. I've just gone through it, sailed through it actually. Really no problems at all. I'm pretty much decimating the terrain out here. Very, very impressive for a car of its size. I also experienced the AMT that gets a unique Traction Pro mode. It detects when one of the front wheels loses traction and gives you an alert. Once engaged, you have to keep one foot on the brake and accelerate gently at the same time so that it will lock the wheel without traction via the brakes and send the power to the other to help the car find a firm enough footing on low grip surfaces. The Punch isn't really an off-roader, but it's good to know that it can get you out of tricky situations you could encounter.
So that's the Tata Punch for you. Small but tough, it's a novel model that doesn't quite have a like-for-like rival, but at the same time is one that's sure to draw buyers from different segments. It's got more personality than your average hatchback, offers the build and elevated seating that you'd associate with a compact SUV, and seems well suited to tough Indian conditions. Expected to be priced from 5.5 to 8 lakh rupees ex-showroom, the Punch will undercut most of the sub-4 meter SUVs currently on sale and will be an alternative to the naturally aspirated versions of the Nissan Magnite and Renault Kiger that are larger in size but lower on par. The Punch will also go up against the base petrol versions of the Hyundai Venue and Kia Sonet. The Tata Punch isn't perfect. Performance could have been better and the AMT still isn't slick, but these factors will unlikely be all that big a bother for the majority of buyers, many of whom will be upgrading from smaller, less powerful models. In other areas, there's a whole lot going in favor of the Punch. So, if Tata can deliver on price, the Punch could be a knockout hit. एक सेकंड ना मैं 30 seconds में try कर लूँगा. The dashboard sports a layered look. Shift shock that is associated with AMG's. The Tata Punch is reasonably roomy for rear seat passengers. अरे क्या बोल रहे हैं?